I also wanted to talk about homesickness. Some of you know that I am from Australia and I left home at 18 and I was the baby of my family. I have one older brother and I know it was really hard on my family. So that's something to consider. If you're the first person, first child in your family that's going to college, it's probably not just hard on you. It's probably may well be harder on the rest of your family because you're off having an adventure and they're not. Suddenly the home is empty. So be considerate of that, especially your mothers. I know mine had a really hard time. But homesickness is something that may happen to you depending on the kind of person you are. It definitely happens to me, still happens to me on occasion. Um, I remember my first night here in the States. I had gotten off the plane. First thing I did was get to my hotel, and I was so jet lagged. I was just going to sleep. And when I walked into that hotel and shut the door, I just burst into tears because I felt like I don't know how many of you had this experience, but the very first sleepover you ever went to at a friend's place, at least for me, it was Murray. Some of you have met him. I went to Muzz's house for a sleepover. Very first sleepover I'd ever done. And when night started to fall, I just suddenly freaked out because it wasn't my house. And I suddenly got really homesick and I started crying and I called mum and asked her to take me home. So she came and got me and took me home. I'm a mama's boy. And those feelings all came rushing back when I shut that hotel door. Um, and you might find yourself in the same place at college. Especially it happens when you're alone. When you're with people, it's easy to be distracted, but when you're alone, it's easy to miss home. Uh, and so my advice would be honestly, God is the one constant between home and where you're going. But whether it's my home in Australia or over here, it's the same God. It's the same, and this is kind of a weird example, but it's the same stars. I look up and it's the same sun every day, and it just reminds me that there's a God who's bigger than it all. This is really a small earth. That the distance between me and my family is relatively small. Um, and another thing that really comforts me is to know that I'm doing what God would have me do. And my parents were huge on this, that they raised me to follow God at all costs. And so how could they be upset if I'm following God to the ends of the earth? And so keeping God forefront, keeping his will for your life as the most important thing and as being really what you're pursuing, that helps if you keep the correct perspective that you're chasing God down and his plan for your life. And I know it sounds cliche, but it's a short time that you're going to be at college, and even at this time on Earth is short. So I don't know. That's my advice. Is I guess it's more sympathy. I can sympathize with you or empathize with you, and God is the constant. So anytime you're feeling homesick, you still have a dad who's right there and who loves you. So go to him and tell him. Just sit on his lap and cry. Um, it's okay, and it'll be over. It will be over. That's my advice. Not that helpful.